Montana Territory, September 1881. The sun was just beginning to dip low behind the pine-covered ridges when Thomas Latimer pulled his mare to a stop on the trail, his eyes narrowing at the sight below. A woman alone, dust-streaked, and barefoot was digging a grave with her hands. He kicked his boots from the stirrups and slid down, rifle still slung across his back. His brother, Elijah, followed suit beside him, both cowboys staring at the woman hacking at the hard, packed dirt with a broken shovel and a bloodied palm. "Ma'am," Thomas called out. "You all right?" She glanced up, sweat running down her temple, dirt smeared across her cheek. Her eyes were the kind of tired that came from more than just work. They were hollow with grief, but held steady when they landed on him. "I do not have time to be all right," she said. "I need to finish this before the sun sets." Thomas looked at the shallow grave and then back at the woman. She could not have been more than 23, maybe 24. Her dress was torn at the hem, the sleeves rolled and soaked through. "Who's it for?" Elijah asked gently. She hesitated, then dropped the shovel and sat back on her heels, hands trembling. "My father, he passed this morning." Thomas took a slow step forward. "You are out here all alone," she nodded. "We were heading to the basin. He took sick along the way, fever hit fast. He did not make it past noon. I promised him I would bury him proper before the sun went down." Thomas looked across the clearing. There was a buckboard wagon not far off, the wheel tilted, axle cracked, no horses. "Where's your team?" he asked. She looked away. "Stolen. Yesterday. Along with the food, my rifle, and anything worth trading." Thomas swallowed hard. "What is your name?" "Fay Monroe," she said quietly. "And I am not helpless. I do not need pity. I need this grave finished." Thomas took off his hat. "Then let us help." "We will dig." She stared at him, eyes sharp. "I do not know you." "My name is Thomas Latimer. That is my brother Elijah. We are just passing through, heading east from Helena. We mean no harm." Fay hesitated, shoulders tight, then gave one small nod. Thomas took the shovel gently from her hand. "You rest. We will finish it." He dug. Hard and fast. Elijah joined him. The sun dropped lower and Fay sat by the edge, her hands in her lap, watching without a word. They finished just before the last edge of light vanished behind the hills. Fay stood and walked to the wagon. She returned with a wrapped bundle, small and still. Thomas stepped back as she lowered it into the ground herself, whispering something too soft to hear. They stood in silence while she knelt beside the grave, smoothing the dirt. Her hands did not tremble anymore. When it was done, she looked up at them. "Thank you. You should not be out here alone," Thomas said. "Not with night coming. I will not leave him." "You do not have to," he said, "but we are staying, just for the night. We will build a fire, keep watch." She looked between him and Elijah, weighing them again, then nodded once. They built a fire near the wagon. Fay stayed quiet, arms wrapped around her knees. Thomas handed her a cup of coffee. She took it without speaking, but her fingers brushed his when she did. She did not pull away. Elijah turned in early, rolling into his blanket near the horses. Thomas sat across from Fay, the firelight catching the streaks of gold in her hair. "How long were you out here alone?" he asked. 2 days, after they took the horses. "I dragged the wagon here myself." Thomas leaned forward. "You could have died." "I still might," she said, her voice low, "but I kept my promise." He looked at her, the quiet strength in her face, the stubborn fire that had not gone out even in the worst of it. "You do not have to die out here," he said. She looked at him, eyes catching the firelight. "Then what do I do?" He leaned in a little closer. "Come with us. Tomorrow we will take you into town. You can rest, eat, figure things out." Fay stared into the flames. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, "I do not have anywhere to go." "You do now," Thomas said. She turned her head slowly. Their eyes met. Her lips parted just slightly, not in surprise but something softer. You do not even know me, she said. Thomas did not look away. I know enough. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she leaned her head against her arms and closed her eyes. That night, Thomas sat beside the grave, rifle across his lap, eyes on the tree line. He thought about her hands, raw and bleeding, digging for someone she loved. He thought about the way she had looked at him, like she was deciding whether or not to trust the world again, and he hoped she would. By morning, she had made her decision. She was already up when he stirred, folding the blanket they had lent her, brushing the dirt from her dress. I will come with you, she said, voice clear. Thomas nodded. We will leave after breakfast. As they packed up, she paused once beside her father's grave, pressing her hand to the mound of dirt. Thomas watched her, something pulling tight in his chest. He did not know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing already. He was not letting her go. The wagon wheel creaked beneath its uneven load as Elijah guided the single pack horse ahead. Its reins looped over his saddle horn. Thomas walked alongside the wagon, eyes scanning the trail and the woman seated on the bench. Faye held the reins loose in her lap. Though the horse yoked to the axle was barely more than a plow nag they'd borrowed from a rancher 2 miles back. She hadn't spoken much since morning, but she rode with her back straight, her chin lifted. There was a cut on her knuckle that had opened again, and she hadn't noticed. You're favoring that hand, Thomas said without looking at her. Faye glanced down. I'll wrap it when we stop. I've got clean cloth and carbolic in my saddlebag, he offered. She nodded once but said nothing more. By midday, they reached a wide stretch of meadow where the grass lay trampled by old cattle drives. The sun hung high and hot, and the smell of pine sap drifted from the trees edging the clearing. We'll rest here, Elijah called back. Thomas helped Faye down from the wagon. Her ankles were scratched from the brush and dust clung to the hem of her skirt. She didn't complain. Instead, she walked to a downed log and sat, pulling her sleeve back to wipe her brow. He fetched his saddlebag and knelt beside her. This'll sting, he said quietly. I've had worse, she answered, holding out her hand. She didn't flinch as he poured the carbolic over the wound. Her fingers trembled slightly when he wrapped the cloth around them, but she kept her eyes on the trees. You ever been to Livingston? He asked. I passed through once when I was a girl, she said. My father was trading pelts. I remember a man with a fiddle on the street corner, and the way the mountains looked like they'd been carved by hand. You remember Sharp, he said. She turned her head toward him. You listen close. Thomas tied the cloth off and sat back on his heels. You planning to stay in town long? I haven't planned much beyond today, she said. I suppose I'll find work if anyone's hiring. There's a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Ellsworth, he said. She's fair and doesn't ask questions. I can take you there. I'd appreciate that, she said, then added after a pause. You speak like you've known her a while. She nursed Elijah through a fever 2 winters ago, he said. Fed us both when we couldn't pay. I'd trust her with anything. They looked off toward the edge of the meadow. I'm not used to trusting folks. You don't have to, he said. But you're not alone anymore. She didn't answer, but she didn't pull away when his hand rested near hers on the log. That night they camped near a creek. Elijah took the first watch and Thomas laid his bedroll a short distance from Faye's. She was already lying down, her hands folded beneath her cheek, facing the stars. You miss him? She asked suddenly. He propped himself on one elbow. Who, your father or your mother? Whoever you lost. He was quiet a long moment. My mother. She died when I was 14. I remember her singing when she thought no one could hear. Faye nodded slowly. My father used to whistle while he cooked, always the same tune. I can't hum it without crying, so I don't. Thomas looked toward the trees. Sometimes I think we carry the people we lose in the things we keep doing, the songs, the habits. She rolled onto her back. "Maybe that's why I keep walking," she said. "He never stopped moving. Never did know how to settle." "Maybe now you can choose different," he said. She turned her head. "And what if I don't know how to be still?" "Then you learn," he said. "And you let someone teach you." He didn't reach for her. Just lay there, watching the shadows shift across her face. The next morning, she rose before either of them, already preparing the wagon. Her movements were steady, methodical, as though she'd always known the rhythm of trail mornings, though Thomas suspected she'd learned it the hard way. They reached the edge of Livingston by late afternoon. Smoke curled from chimneys and children's laughter drifted faintly from behind the mercantile. Horses clopped past on the muddy street, and the scent of yeast from a nearby bakery made her pause. "You all right?" Thomas asked. Faye looked around. "I didn't expect it to feel like this." "Like what?" "Like I could stay," she said. He watched her as she took it all in: the hardware store with its cracked window pane, the dog sleeping on the steps of the post office, the worn sign above the saloon. Her shoulders eased just slightly. They passed the blacksmith's, and the boarding house came into view, its front porch shaded by a sagging awning. A rocking chair creaked softly where an older woman sat with her knitting. "That's Mrs. Ellsworth," Thomas said. "I'll introduce you." Faye stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Will you stay?" she asked. "After," he met her gaze. "If you want me to." She nodded, her fingers slipping from his sleeve. They stepped onto the porch together. Faye stood at the window of the boarding house room, her palm pressed to the cool glass. Below, the street stirred with the day's end. Ranch hands trading coin at the dry goods store, a girl chasing a dog through the dust, someone calling out for supper from behind a screen door. The hour had turned soft, and with it, something in her chest loosened too. Behind her, Thomas knocked gently on the frame. "Mrs. Ellsworth says she's got stew on, said you're welcome to stay as long as you like. There's work in the kitchen if you're willing." "I don't mind labor," Faye said, turning. "I just needed a place to land, not a cushion." Thomas stepped inside, removing his hat. "You've got grit, that's plain." She crossed her arms. "Is that what you think I am? Grit and mule stubborn?" "No," he said, his voice low. "I think you're someone who's had to carry more than most and kept going anyway." Faye looked down at her skirts, at the threadbare cuffs she'd stitched 3 times over. "I was raised to run toward hard things. Never did know how to wait for help." "You didn't wait," he said. "You made a choice." "That's different." She met his gaze. "Why are you still here?" He sat on the edge of the chair near the stove, hands clasped loosely. "Because I want to be." Faye watched him in the quiet between lantern flickers. "You don't owe me anything, Thomas." "I know." "That's not why I stayed." She came to sit near the hearth, folding her hands in her lap. "You ever think about settling? Not just stopping for a spell, but truly staying put?" He studied her. "I used to think I'd keep drifting till I was too old to ride. But lately, I've been wondering what it would be like to build something that don't move." She tilted her head. "And what would that be?" He hesitated, then said, "A home. Not just a roof, but something made with another person. Someone who sees the world the way I do. Someone who's not afraid to start from the raw." Faye's voice quieted. "You think I see it the way you do?" "I think you know what it costs to rebuild after loss," he said. "And you don't flinch from it." The air between them settled like a blanket, warm and weighty. She reached for the kettle and poured water into a basin, dipping a cloth to clean her hands. "My mother died birthing me. My father never remarried. He taught me how to track, read weather by the taste of wind, but he never taught me how to be soft." Thomas leaned forward. "You're not hard. You're guarded, that's earned. I don't know how to give myself over to something that might go away again." He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, "I won't promise forever, not yet, but I'll stay as long as you let me." Faye wrung the cloth and set it aside. If I asked you not to leave tomorrow, would you still say the same next week? He nodded. I would. Her fingers found the edge of the table, tracing the grain. Then stay for supper. For tomorrow we'll see about the rest. He stood, walked to where she sat, and offered his hand. She took it. Not out of uncertainty, but like someone reaching for a lantern on a dark trail, knowing the light wouldn't falter. They walked downstairs together, the scent of stew and cornbread rising to meet them. Elijah was already seated, his fork tapping against his plate, but he looked up and grinned when he saw them. Thomas pulled out a chair for her. She sat without hesitation. As the meal passed, laughter came easier than it had in days. Faye listened more than she spoke, but her eyes lingered on Thomas's face when he laughed, and once her hand brushed his beneath the table. She didn't pull away. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the porch had gone quiet, she stood beside him beneath the eaves. Do you think it's possible, she said, to plant something here that lasts? He looked at her, eyes steady. If it's planted with care. She nodded slowly. Then maybe I'll stay a while. He didn't answer, just stepped closer and let his hand rest lightly on hers, and she didn't move away. Inside, the lamp flickered low. Outside, the stars began to press through the dark in slow constellations. Neither of them said good night. They didn't need to. Late September brought a shift in the town's air-cooler mornings, the scent of coal smoke curling from chimneys, and the rustle of cottonwood leaves drying to gold along the riverbanks. Faye stood behind the boarding house, sleeves rolled, her hands sunk wrist-deep in a basin of suds. The sun hadn't yet cleared the rooftops, and the quiet was a kind she hadn't known in weeks. She heard the gate click open and Thomas's boots move across the packed dirt behind her. You always up this early? He asked. I don't sleep much past first light, she said. Habit. He leaned his shoulder against the post near the clothesline. Mrs. Ellsworth says you've about worn out her washboard. She lets me earn my keep. You already earned your place, Faye. She didn't turn. I'd rather keep moving forward than stand around remembering. He stepped closer. Then come with me today. I'm hauling supplies out to a homestead past Pine Coulee. Could use the company. She lifted a wet sheet, wrung it once, and pinned it to the line. I'm not much for riding lately. You'll ride in the wagon bed. I'll bring a cushion. She shook her head but didn't say no. By mid-morning they were rumbling over the ridge road, the wagon heavy with flour sacks, nails, and a crate of window panes. Pines crowded close on either side, their needles brushing the canvas top. Faye sat with her back against a sack of grain, her hair braided down her back, a loose shawl around her shoulders. Thomas glanced back once. You been outside town since you got here? Not till now. I wasn't sure I wanted to see open land again. What made you change your mind? I was tired of letting fear tell me what I can't do. He didn't speak for a while after that. The horses plodded steady, hooves muffled in dust. A hawk wheeled overhead, casting its shadow across the trail. After a while she asked, that homestead, who's it for? Widow with 4 boys. Her husband died in spring. Church folk pooled money to help raise her barn. I said I'd bring what she couldn't fetch herself. Faye's hands rested in her lap. You do that often. Help strangers. They don't stay strangers long. They reached the crest of the hill, and the valley opened beneath them, fields brushed gold by autumn, a narrow stream glinting through the cottonwoods, and a cabin with smoke rising thin and straight from its chimney. Faye leaned forward. It's quiet down there. It's honest land, he said. Hard to farm, but it gives back what you tend with care. She looked at him. You think you'd ever want a place like that? I think about it more lately than I used to. They unloaded in silence, working side by side. She carried smaller items, sacks of seed, a bundle of kindling. Her movements were sure, her footing careful on the uneven slope. The widow greeted them with a nod and a tired smile, her youngest clinging to her skirt. Fay knelt and offered the boy a carved wooden bird from the crate, her fingers gentle. When they climbed back into the wagon, Thomas said, "You're good with children." "I've never had one." "Still," he said. She folded the shawl tighter. "I used to think about it. What it'd be like to raise something that didn't have to be afraid." He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You'd be the kind to teach them truth without cutting their hope down." She looked at him sideways. "You don't say things you don't mean." "No," he said. "I don't." The sun was low when they returned to town, the wagon creaking under the empty crates. They stopped beside the boarding house and Fay gathered her shawl, stepping down. He followed, his hand brushing hers as they crossed the yard. She stopped at the stairs. "I've been thinking." He waited. "I don't want to come undone again," she said. "I've just now started to feel solid." "You won't," he said. "Not with me. I believe you." She lifted her eyes to his, and the look between them held no uncertainty. He reached for her hand, and this time she laced her fingers through his. "I want to see what we could be," she said. He nodded. "So do I." They stood there, the air cooling around them, the distant sound of a fiddle drifting faint from the saloon. Fay leaned her head lightly to his shoulder, and they didn't speak again that night. They didn't need to. October settled into Livingston with a hush. The hills wore rust-red edges, and frost clung to the porch rails each morning. Fay had taken over the kitchen at the boarding house on Thursdays, and Thomas came by after the freight wagons were unloaded, his boots tracking in dust and his voice low at her ear when he greeted her. By then, he no longer knocked before stepping into her days. One evening, she found him in the backyard, mending a saddle strap with steady hands, sleeves rolled to his elbows. The sky behind him was turning that clear violet that only came just before the cold pressed in. "You always fix things you didn't break?" she asked. Thomas didn't look up. "Only when they're worth keeping." She leaned against the porch post, arms folded, watching the slow way his fingers worked the all-through leather. "You're not much for fancy words. No need for 'em when plain ones do." Fay studied him a moment. "You've been quiet lately. I've been thinking." "About?" He set the strap down and met her eyes. "About what it would take to build something lasting, for real." Her voice came softer. "You mean with me?" "I do." The wind picked up, dry leaves scraping along the fence. Fay stepped closer, her shawl slipping from one shoulder. "I don't know what comes after this. I've never had a life not built around leaving." Thomas looked at her, steady and sure. "Then let's build around staying." She hesitated, then reached for his hand, calloused and warm where it closed around hers. "I wouldn't know what to call what we're doing." "You don't have to call it anything just yet," he said. "But I know what I want." "What's that?" "To wake beside you each morning knowing we've got a piece of land, a warm roof, and a reason to come home." She stared at him, her throat tight. "You'd really want that, with me?" "I already do." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped into him, her brow resting against his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her like he'd been waiting to do so since the day they met. They didn't come apart for a long time. That Sunday, they rode out past the river bend, where Thomas had been eyeing a narrow parcel of land just west of the foothills. They dismounted in silence, the horses cropping grass nearby while they walked the perimeter. "I know it ain't much yet," he said, towing at the edge of a stone. "But it's sound ground, south-facing slope, good light, water nearby." Fay knelt, breaking the dirt with her fingers. "Soil's clean, turns easy." "I thought maybe this could be ours." She looked up. "Ours, if you want it." Her smile came slow but certain. "Then we'd best start drawing up what goes where." In the weeks that followed, they marked boundaries with stakes and twine. Elijah helped fell the first trees for the frame, and Mrs. Ellsworth sent them with tins of preserves, and a jar of pickled onions Faye pretended to enjoy. Each day they worked until the light failed, and each night they returned to the boarding house with sawdust in their hair and a growing sense that the shape of their lives was no longer uncertain. By late November, the walls stood chest-high, and Thomas carved their initials into the threshold beam before Faye could stop him. "I should have done that," she said, mock stern. "We'll put yours next." She traced the rough letters with her fingertips. "I never thought I'd have a name on anything again." Thomas leaned beside her. "Now you've got one on the thing we're building together." She didn't answer right away, but her hand found his, and they stood like that until the light faded. They were married in early December, quiet and simple at the chapel near the rail yard. Elijah stood as witness, and Mrs. Ellsworth pressed a lace-trimmed handkerchief into Faye's hand before the vows began. Faye wore a blue dress with a mended hem, and Thomas had shaved close for the first time in weeks. When the preacher asked if she would take this man as her husband, Faye said yes without hesitation. Thomas's voice didn't tremble when he said the same. They moved into the finished cabin 2 days later. It smelled of fresh cut pine and wood smoke, and the mattress was stuffed with wool Faye had carded herself. The first night they lay close beneath the quilts, the fire low, and she whispered, "I didn't think I'd have this." Thomas brushed her hair back. "This was always waiting for you, you just had to make it through." "I'm here now, you're home," he said. She pressed her lips to his, slow and certain, and they didn't speak again until morning. Years passed and the seasons turned. Thomas grew a garden behind the cabin, and Faye kept hens. Elijah married a schoolteacher and built a home not 2 miles away. The town changed a little, but the land stayed steady. Faye never left again. She cooked on the same hearth where they'd first laid their plans. She taught herself to read seed catalogs and stitched baby quilts in the evenings with her legs curled beneath her. There was a cradle in the corner by spring, and later that year, a daughter with Thomas's eyes and Faye's quiet strength. They named her Clara. And when the wind blew through the cottonwoods, Faye would hold her close and hum the tune her father used to whistle in the mornings. She didn't cry when she sang it anymore. Thomas built a swing between 2 trees and watched his girls laugh beneath its arc. He held Faye's hand as they sat on the porch, boots up on the rail, hearts full from all they had earned. They had nothing fancy, but everything they needed. And each night, when the lamp was turned low and the cabin walls glowed warm with firelight, they knew they had found what they were meant to build, a life steady as the land beneath them, and a love that had weathered every storm to grow strong in the sun.